We're reading Horeb from Shimson Raphael Hirsch, right? We're on chapter 4, the world around us. And that you go out about after your own heart and after your own eyes, after which you use to go astray. What is that from?
The Shema.
It's from the Shema, and it's a warning that the feelings of your heart and the lust of your eyes has to be controlled by the intellect and by something greater than yourself. Your emotions, your sensitivities are all legitimate, but they have to be within a framework, within a context, is what Rav Hirsch is saying. And he says here, explaining this, our sages, Chazal, say, look not upon the world without consulting the Torah, nor only with the eye of your rational understanding or your physical eye, lest the first lead you into wrong notions of God, idolatry, and the second into bestial indulgence, both together with idolatry, the worst kinds of behavior, the immoral behavior. So he's actually warning us of two things. Right? It's very important to understand both of these things here, right? He says you shouldn't look at the world without consulting the Torah. So when you see the world, then go back, look at the Torah, and see what does the Torah say about what you're observing, and know from that how to behave. But there's another issue, which particularly in the world of Hirsch, which was the world of Kant and the world of the great philosophers, he warns about also, and that is rational thought in and of itself. Do not think that through rational thought alone you can come to conclusions. You need to go back to the Torah, right? Something that is super rational, that's above rational thinking, because after all, what created rational thinking?
That's it.
So that there is a power beyond that, right? And that is crystallized within the Torah. And he warns you not to be driven by your physical appetites, but also not to go to just your pure rational intellect and think that is where the answers will come from. They will come from God as spoken through the Torah. Right? And one, he's saying, can lead you to idolatry if you ignore the Torah. Right? If you choose the ism as your God, the communism, Nazism, heaven forbid, socialism, any of those things. Right? And the other can just be driven by your physical appetites and your desires, right? Which will carry you in the wrong direction. Your rational understanding, which is intended only for comprehension of the creature world, knows only what can be seen or touched. Right? So you're limited in your rational understanding to your senses. Right? That is all that exists for it. And when guided by it alone, you look out upon the world, and the interplay of things gives you the idea that phenomena, when linked together, constitute a world. You try ceaselessly to turn the chain into a closed and self-contained circle. Okay? So, and this is his argument with Aristotle. You're looking out into the world and you're seeing different things. You know, there's a red light here, there's a bus there, there's food on sale there, there's, you know, somehow your email won't connect, you know, whatever it is. And it seems like chaos, right? And he's saying your email works now, and he's saying that when you look at it, you'll be discouraged because it doesn't seem to have a coordination, right? And it'll trouble you. And even if you suspect the existence of other forces and you do not succeed in closing the circle, if your chain of reasoning leads irrefutably to one force which you regard as the first and which you posit as the original motive force of phenomenon, and you call this original force God, then you must regard this original force as being the only primary force, the first link in the chain. But this is not the personal holy God of the Torah who exists for all existing things, who above all beings and yet penetrates all with his omnipotence and universal love, the God who by his will and with his power and for the purpose set by his wisdom called all into being, the living God who dominates the whole passage of time, who is also your God and who sanctifies you. So his point is, when you look out into this, right, you may conclude, yes, there is a central force to the universe. There is, what is the intelligent design, I think is the expression.
Yeah.
Right? Lest you make this terrible mistake to think that it is some distant force, you'll misunderstand everything. That it is a great force, and it does organize the universe, and it does have a purpose to it, and it is intelligent, and it is God. But it is more than that. It is a God that is infusing you personally, that is directing you, that is concerned with your every move, with how you tie your shoes in the morning, with how you wash yourself, with how you eat, how you, dress, when you pray and how you pray, how you relate to your fellow man, how you do business. It says that the first question a man is asked when he comes up to Shemayim is, were you honest in business? That's the first question that a person will be asked, right? This is something that God is concerned about. Not, are people honest in business? Are you honest in business? Am I honest in business? Right? It's very specific, right? And we often get confused because we don't understand how it is possible for God to be concerned in such detail with so many people. Right? Because and the reason we have this problem is that we're anthropomorphizing God. Because we're thinking, okay, God is really smart, and he doesn't need to sleep at night. So he's got time to get all this done, and he has the most powerful computing systems, right? So through all this stuff, he can do it, right? No. None of it relates at all, right? Because God is something beyond what we can fathom, right? But God has the capacity to do these infinite things. We know from our own lives. We see them daily in our own lives that this is happening, right? It's not just happening to me and to you, and to him and to him. It's actually happening to everybody. Not everybody observes it. Who dominates the whole passage of time, and who is also your God who sanctifies you. Him, God, you will not have. Him, the all-powerful, the all-sustaining, the all-righteous, the all-loving, high above all, yet near to all. What you attain to this is the denial and the misrepresentation of God. Minus, right? This is idolatry, right? This is intellectualizing God, right? So you have an understanding, the cosmologists and astrophysicists understand that something triggered the Big Bang. Right? They don't know what it is, but then something triggered it. Maybe God. You can't deny that it's God until they know alternately, right? It could be God. But once that's done, right, God's work is finished. He lit the match, the Big Bang happened, and then everything follows through the laws that he set up. Right? Well, even this now is becoming a big question, because the question of expanding universe, static universe, right? And more than that, how does one explain coincidence in this world? Bizarre coincidence that the odds are so much against. How does one explain miracles in this world? Well, people try. And God creates a world in which it is possible for people to deny miracles and to deny God's existence. Why? Because the central theme, which we'll see in other places, is the idea of freedom to make choices. Freedom to make choices means freedom to make mistakes. Right? You can't make mistakes when God is 100% revealed. This is the whole point of it. Is that so God has to have an element of concealment to it. The Malachim, the angels, never make this mistake, because God is unveiled to them and they can only do exactly what is the will of God. The bottom of the page. As for your physical eye, remember there were two elements that can lead us astray, which is our rational intellect and our physical eye. As for your physical eye, which sees only material things, that can discern only bodies, if you follow its tracks in its observation of the world, it never beholds a unity. To it, the world's only a mass of individuals, each living for itself, pursuing its own enjoyment. You cannot discern the law which governs them all, in which they all obey, even in their self-seeking, which summons them to something higher. And if your body, which is served by your eye, also has impulses and wishes to enjoy itself, why should you restrain it? Why should it not revel in enjoyment? Why should it not be like the plant and the animal, whose impulses have free play? You are, after all, akin to both of them, and if you join their company, you become plant and animal, bestial and rioting in pleasure. This is nous. This is immoral behavior. So he's saying that when you're examining the world with your eye, with your lustful eye, what you'll see is there isn't a unity in the world. It doesn't really make sense. And what does make sense is I'm out for myself. Right? What gives me pleasure, right? That's what it's about. And, you know, there are very famous people in this world who seem to have everything. And they get themselves entrapped in the most bizarre, immoral behavior. And you can't even understand why, because it didn't have to happen. They would have other outlets that they could have had that are not so crazy, right? But they are driven by this idea that the world is there purely for my pleasure. Now, lest anybody be confused, Judaism is not a faith that says you should deny pleasure. It says there are many pleasures, right? And you should partake of those pleasures in the right place and the right time. Right? In fact, we know that when somebody chooses to take an oath of denial of something, right, at the end of the period of time of that denial, right, he has to bring an offering, and the offering is a sin offering that he brings. Why a sin offering? What was his sin? He was actually living a pristine, sanctified life. Why a sin offering? It's because God does not think that it is wise to deny what He has put in this world for you.
That's a good point. Yeah.
It's a sin to deprive yourself of it. When God said,
"No,
it's for you."
You can have it. Yeah.
You know, I mean, there are things that we do deny ourselves, right? And there are times we deny ourselves. You know, for 8 days in Pesach, no matter how good challah looks, we say no. But challah is a good example because we don't say no challah that it's bad, right? We say no challah during those 8 days, and we look forward to having it the following after, or on the Shabbos after, right? Even with things that are, you know, clearly forbidden to us, like eating bugs or eating pork or shellfish, right? We don't say they're bad foods, right? It's just not appropriate for us to be eating. That's what the Torah tells us. You should not eat it. Right? It doesn't talk about people who are not Jewish in this situation. You should not eat it. Right? We accept that, right? Both minus and sinus, that is to say, this intellectual analysis or being driven by emotions, leads to idolatry. Riotous enjoyment leads to it directly. You know, the example we have is, of course, the different kinds of pagan worship that existed in the ancient world, which revolved around inebriation and sexual promiscuity.
Pretty sick.
You know, yeah. Right. But that was, you know, a big part of how you worshipped the gods, was through a demonstration of different appetites that a person had. Some were genuinely bizarre. You know, there was one idol that the practice of it was to throw rocks at it.
Right. Ball, the way you serve ball is by.
And there was another idol that you served by defecating and cleaning yourself on the idol. This was another form of it, right? But the most common form was the idea of temple prostitutes and sexuality. Was that you would reach a very high level of communion with God through promiscuous behavior.
And it always seems to be the guy, the leader of the group, who gets all so stupid full of crap. That's what it is.
For as soon as enjoyment becomes the object of your life, you no longer regard yourself as belonging to the world, but the world belongs to you. And you know no law but your own capricious impulses. From that moment, too, you will no longer understand what is meant by unselfishness. You will see in every creature around you a being which obeys only itself and works only for itself. And the world will be split up for you into a crowd of godlike beings obeying only themselves. It's so interesting that he wrote this in the 1830s.
No.
Because the idea of, what do we live in? What is the most valuable gift somebody wants? An iPhone, an iPod, an iPad, right?
That's right.
It's not a sharing phone. It's not a sharing pad.
It's an iPad.
It's I. It's I. Right? And as soon as you believe that it's I, you become a god, right? Because you make the rules, right? We believe we don't make the rules. We believe God makes the rules, right? And He gave them to us, divinely gave them to us, and we will live in a better world and have a better life if we follow these rules. They're for our benefit, not for His. But if you dismiss God, then it's not simply becoming an atheist. It's actually replacing God, because you still have rules. It's only you make up the rules, right? I rules. Right, you have an iPad, an iPhone, an iPod, and I rules. Right? And that's what God is. You become the God in that situation. And if then, in the embrace of sensuality, you have stripped yourself of everything spiritual, no longer retaining any feeling for the divine, you will yourself become aware in your impulses of your feebleness and instability, your inconstancy and pleasure, and you will fall prostrate before every creature that provides you with enjoyment itself. That itself seems to you so noble and so everlasting in its enjoyment. And yet in truth your weakness in combating your impulses and love of pleasure ought to have reminded you of your higher destiny, and behind the substance of the beings around you, and you should have discerned their lawgiver. So you should understand that all the pleasures have a place. They have a place, and God gave them to us. Right? The feelings we have, the emotions, the desires, the hungers that we have, are not in and of themselves evil. They may, in some cases, be tests. Right? But for sure, if you think for a second, right? Let's say you took no pleasure in food. Right? People who take pills, right? So when they take pills, they have to have different ways of knowing when to take the pill. They have different calculators, and that some have alarms on them. Right? And sometimes they just have boxes that'll have morning, afternoon, evening, night.
Yeah.
Right. To take their pills. Right? Why? They don't have a hunger for the pills. Right? And if they didn't have memory devices for it, they wouldn't take the pills. If you didn't have a lust and a hunger for food, you would starve to death. There are more interesting things to do than to sit and eat. I mean, if you think about it, sitting and eating, what is it? Right? No, sitting and eating is a great pleasure. The taste, the texture, the socializing. It's very central to a person's existence, sitting and eating. Right? It's also a requirement that if you didn't do it, you would die of hunger.
Okay.
And in truth, your weakness in combating your impulses and love of pleasure ought to have reminded you of your higher destiny. And behind the substance of the beings around you, you should have discerned their lawgiver, whose law, that is to say, as you're looking around you in the world, right, you should understand that there is something that controls all of this, called the lawgiver, whose law is unchangeable because his omnipotence keeps it so. You can also reach idolatry, or rather polytheism, directly through the eye and the understanding of the senses, if the Torah does not reveal to you the one and only God. For with your physical eye and understanding you behold only particular beings and activities, but not the invisible one, with his one dominating law. You see only gods, not God. This is Avodah Zarah.
Avodah Zarah is idol worship?
Yeah, okay. Avodah Zarah is idol worship. And what he's saying is that the observation of the great philosophers, of Plato, of Socrates, of Aristotle, and into the Roman times, right? These are all people who were polytheists. And they looked around them and they said, the reason why the moon comes up is that it's weaker than the sun. The god of the sun and the god of the moon are contesting, the god of the sun won, right? Or why the tides come in. They didn't put it together. And they had science and they had a lot of tremendous development, philosophical development, but they didn't understand the idea of a unity of God. And their explanation for anything bad that happened was a contest between gods. That was what their issue was.
Your machine is working.
So this quality of observation, of the world around you, if it is not seen through Torah and through the ideas of one God, will lead you to paganism, to polytheism, as it did in the past. And that's his point, right? Is that through the eye, if Torah does not reveal to you the one and only God, right? And this is why God gave it to us, right?
We're seeing that now, though, like you said, with the eye, everything.
Yeah, that's right.
We see it in real life.
Not so Israel. Here's the exception to the rule. Not so Israel. Only through the medium of the God and man revealing Torah must it view the world and itself. It must regard both God and the Torah from which it learns the law as a fact, as much a fact as heaven and earth, and link them with the facts perceived by the outer and inner eyes, and only then, thus equipped, contemplate the world and itself. It must not try to understand God from the world itself, but the world itself from God, right? This is the essential point that we were talking about earlier. Then you will see the world as a work of wisdom and the product of an omnipotent creating ruling God, in which every impulse and every action obeys His law, and all beings serve the purpose fixed by His wisdom. And you will conceive yourself as a man, an Israelite, joining of your own free choice the band of those who serve God, summoned to holiness even in your freedom, the first servant in the throng of existing things, freely performing the will of God revealed to you. Sometimes a mother will say to the child, you're going to eat your string beans. You can either eat them and enjoy them, or eat them and not enjoy them. But you're going to eat your string beans tonight. So this is harsh. Right? But the mother is saying, you need this to survive. Right? Fact of the matter is that all the universe serves God. Some resent doing it, but they do it. Some try very hard not to do it, and in their efforts trying not to do it, they do it. We have examples of Paro, of Balak, of a number of the most evil people in the Torah and history, right, have a purpose, right? Now, we say that an evil person is sent to do an evil task. Right? So we don't believe that a good person did something evil because it had to be done. The world works smoothly in that sense. But there is no opposing force to God. None. Right? The idea of Satan, the idea of the devil, the idea of, Satan made me do this, God, the devil made me do this. Right? These are not Jewish ideas. Right? Because Satan exists. And Satan is a real problem. Right? But Satan is a real problem. Why? Satan is a real problem because in order to improve us, God created Nisonos, tests. Right? And we see that Abraham had 10 very difficult tests. Hunger, sacrifice, human sacrifice, sending away his son Ishmael, who he loved. Right? He had many tests, leaving his father's home, not knowing where he was going to end up. Right? Many, many tests. We all have tests in this world. Right? And those tests, if they don't arouse doubt in us, then they're not tests. A person who says, I go through life, I am 100% undoubtingly committed to a God that I cannot see or touch. Maybe such a person exists. Right? But it means that God hasn't tested him. Right? Or that God has tested him and he passed the test and came to this conclusion. Yeah. That's possible too. But there is a point in your life where people have doubts, struggle with those doubts, overcome those doubts, and they can be, they can be in whatever area it is that God feels you need to be strengthened, because that's where the tests will be, inevitably. But at the end of the day, when it's all done, right, is we see the unity of the world, as Jews. And if we choose to serve God, it's as if to say, there aren't two teams on the football field, right? There's the varsity squad, and there's the junior squad they're scrimmaging against, but they both go to the same school. Right? And really, the junior squad is actually there to prepare us, right? So the varsity squad practices against them. And they tried very hard to beat the varsity squad. But in the end, the varsity squad is going to win. Right? So it is with everybody in this world. Sometimes people think they're on the other side. Right? Or they think God has switched sides, and he's on their side to do evil in this world. Bizarre thought. But people sometimes believe that. To choose to be on the right side and to do the work of this omnipotent entity just makes sense, is what Hirsch is saying. We see this example with the servant of Abraham, Eliezer. Eliezer understood that he was going to be a servant, right? That he was born into a world in which he would serve. So his question was not, I refuse to be a servant, because he was destined to be a servant and he understood that. The question is, who will I be a servant of? Right? Bob Dylan asked the same question. Everybody's got to serve somebody. Am I serving the president of the National Broadcasting Corporation, CNN, Al-Qaeda? Who am I serving? Right? So I'm called upon to serve the Rabbanu Shalom. Right? This is specifically who we're called upon to do. Right? It means there's a vacancy close to the throne. Right? If we say, no, I don't want to be a servant, so I'm not going to serve next to the throne. Right? I'm going to be my own man out here in the jungle. It seems to me it's bad judgment. Right? Because that spot is put aside specifically, for a group of people. Right? And Hirsch is saying we know who those people are. So it would be wise for them to take advantage of the opportunity, so to speak. Right? And that's why he says, you will conceive yourself as a man, Israelite, joining of your own free will choice the band of those who serve God, summoned to holiness, even in your freedom, the first servant in the throng of existing things, freely performing the will of God revealed to you. So everybody's going to do it. Some will resist it, but they're going to do it. You can't go against the flow. Right? If you choose to be the leader to go along with the flow, that's wise. But even after you have gained your conception of God from the Torah, beware above all of your sensory understandings of applying to God the standards of the senses and thinking that for that understanding you have answered questions about God and His providence, and though you have not found either of them within the compass of sensuous understanding. That is understanding through your senses. Your understanding is competent only to investigate the created world. For that purpose it was given to you. That world is the sphere of your activity, and only insofar as it is the sphere of your activity is your understanding adequate. So here he's saying that God has given you tools, right? The tools of your senses are for the analysis of the world around you and to do the will of God through that analysis, right? Don't think through those senses you can get into the mind of God, right? That is beyond you, right? Any more than the painting can get into the mind of the painter. The painting is in the mind of the painter, but the painter, the painting itself, cannot imagine what the painter is thinking. Right? The painter, by the way, knows exactly what the person taking the cheese and wine out of the picnic basket in his painting is thinking and saying. The painter knows that. Right? But that person in the painting, on the canvas, has no clue. So the purpose of it is to observe that which we can observe. Right? The Torah too discloses to you only what the created world is to you and what you are to the created world, what God is and ought to be for you, for your activities and the performance of your task in life. Whatever lies beyond this does not disclose to you, the reason being that it has no application to life, to active and creative life of human beings. Do not seek, therefore, to investigate with your reason what the Torah does not disclose to you, because it is unattainable by you, and even if you were attained, it would be of no use. Right? So tonight, you go to sleep and say, I now understand the mind of God.
Okay.
Right? My father had an expression, and he would say, that and a token gets you into the subway. If you want to get into the subway, you should focus on having the token. Right? Don't focus on the mind of the person who runs the whole subway system. Focus on having the token. Right? Without the token, you're not going to get into the subway, no matter how connected you are to the mind of that guy who created the transit system. Before embarking on any inquiry, ask yourself whether it is within your power and whether it would be of any advantage to good living. And if you find the answer in the negative, then the mere desire to investigate it is, as the sage's expression, a derogation of the divine majesty. An arrogant attempt to overstep the bounds which God, in His wisdom, has set for you. Hence it is also harmful, because it makes one discontented and arouses doubts, and so easily slides one into minus. Our sages therefore impress upon us to refrain from all speculation on such topics as the existence and the essence of God. Right? Begin with God exists and that His essence is beyond our knowing. Right?
Can't fathom the God.
Because if this comes back to Rav David Shochet's, a great Talmud Chacham, who likes to say, a God who I understand, a God whose essence I understand, is much too small a God for me. Much too small. This is a great Talmud Chacham.
Sure.
But his point here is that you're dealing with infinite knowledge and you're finite. So why would you think that you're going to cross that bridge? You're not. And it's a waste of time and energy, and you're making small of something that is great.
You can't
You think
fit
you
it.
can do. Yeah. What God is to you, creator, lawgiver, judge, father, and so on, and what his world is to you, and what you should be to it, that is disclosed to you. His work and his word, nature, history, Torah are open before you. Therefore search out his work and his will in order that you may behold him in all that is and all that comes to being, and that understanding his will ever more clearly in this world of God, under God's all-seeing eye and with his ever-present aid, you may school yourself to be the active performer of the divine will, the servant of God. Any knowledge that does not lead to this end does not belong in the sphere of man. The sages have already noted that the scripture begins with the letter Bet, in order to warn you at the very beginning that what is before this world, what is above it, and what is below it is beyond the bounds of your inquiry. Your task is to press forward in your own sphere, always diligently serving God, and this your inquiry should aim. For this your understanding suffices. God has given you the tools to make this world a godly place. God has put before you all the information that you need. And if you think, gee, in order to manage this thing, I need to know the essence of God. You know, I had a friend.
Yeah.
I have a friend who told me, he said, you know, I always am intrigued when I see people who are on bicycles, right? And they're not fit. They're 150 pounds overweight. But they shave all the hair off their legs and arms to cut down on wind resistance.
But they're 150 pounds overweight.
But they're 150 pounds overweight, right? But, you know, they're wearing these bicycle suits, right? And they're bicycling, right? They're very out of shape, very overweight, right? But lest the wind should slow them down, right? They shave all the hair from that part which is exposed right, outside. You know, there are those of us who want to devote our time to understanding the essence of God, but we don't get up in time to say Shema on time. The essence of God says, say Shema on time. The essence of God says, when you eat an orange, thank God for the fruit of the tree. Right? There's so much for us to explore within the sphere that God has permitted us to explore, that to go outside of that sphere is as if to say, you know, I'm going to do graduate work in neurosurgery right, before I understand, you know, how to disinfect a wound and put a Band-Aid on it. You know, you can spend a lot of time learning how to take care of that wound, right? You know, before you get to the next stage, right? And the mystics, the Kabbalists, don't deal with these issues either. They stop at the issue of the essence of God. This is something that is out of bounds, and they do not pursue. They don't pursue it because it's a chutzpah to pursue it. You know, me and him, you know, we have an understanding. I'm infinite, he's infinite. Right? We're cool. Right? No. We're finite. We will come into this world and we will go out of this world. Right? And if Baruch Hashem Mashiach comes and we rise again, right? We rise because of a system that he created. Right? He will be here before the universe was created and after the universe is over. We don't have access to that. That could depress you, right? But it shouldn't, because God has told us all the tools you need are right here, and you will never, if you live to 120, be able to fathom all the things I already gave you. You don't have to reach beyond it. We need in our lives the tools to make the judgments for our lives. And they are very, very serious issues that we confront. How to raise our children, what schools our child should go to, who should we marry, who should our children marry, how should I spend my time, how do I earn my living. These may seem like mundane things, but the truth of the matter is that the mitzvah that we were given initially when we left Egypt was the mitzvah of time, of Rosh Chodesh. And God is making very clear that when Adam sinned, time became very, very, very important. Before the sin of Adam, when you lived an infinite amount of time, then time wasn't so important. You could say, well, I think I'll spend 10 years on a roller coaster. Because I'm going to live 100,000 years, and I can spend, 20,000 years just learning one Masechet of Gemara. Then I'll go for another, 100,000 years learning another Masechet. Time isn't the issue, right? And I am going to become a great Talmud Chacham, but I'm also going to have 10 years on the roller coaster too. Right? But when Adam sinned, Chava sinned, and death came into the world, probably the biggest impact that it had was to say, you better prioritize.
No.
You're not going to have 15 careers. Maybe you'll have 2, maybe 3. Right? But you're going to choose them very carefully, and there's going to be a lot of qualifiers to how you choose those things, right? How you prepare for them. So the issue of wanting to explore the greatest mysteries of the universe in terms of the essence of God is unbecoming, unseemly, and inappropriate when you consider how much work we have to do to explore our own. I leave you with something that Rabbi Breitowitz likes to remind us of on a regular basis, is that when we say the first sentence of Shema, and we end in the word Echad, one, and we draw out the word Echad, right? There are many kavanas that people have with that drawn out sound, right? The 7 heavens, the 4 directions, there's lots of different things, right? That God is ruling, the Dalet is 4, ruling the 4 directions, right? And above and below, 6 directions, right? And God rules in Tanzania, right? And God rules in Memphis, Tennessee, right? One should, in the midst of all that, remember that God rules you. And that's the most essential thing. God is your personal God, rules you, and He's given you the tools to have a fulfilling life and to make the world a better place. We should do so, and we should do so in preparation for the coming of Mashiach. Horeb, which should happen now.